So this is the flaming chalice now lit. And I'll begin by saying that the issue of immigration has been with us from the beginning of time, I think. Whenever a stranger wandered into the right or the wrong camp, so much so that in Leviticus we're reminded when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him harm. The stranger who sojourns with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you too were strangers in the land of Egypt. And I would say that the issues also go back to the beginnings of the Republic. So George Washington was moved at one point to say, the bosom of America is open to receive not only the opulent and respectable stranger, but the oppressed and persecuted of all nations and all religions. And some of you may not know that before he ran for president, John Kennedy wrote a book called A Nation of Immigrants, and in fact had pressed for immigration reform in the Senate. And in a portion of that essay, he quotes the Emma Lazarus poem on the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And then he goes on to say, until 1921, this was an accurate picture of our society. Under present law, it would be appropriate to add, quote, as long as they come from Northern Europe, are not too tired or too poor or slightly ill, never stole a loaf of bread, never joined any questionable organization, and can document their activities for the last 2 years. Actually, just this morning, I was looking at an article that I had pulled from an old journal. I've been trying to look at old journals and see what I could throw out. So this is from the 1989 American Journal of Medicine, and the title's Pancreatitis and Typhoid Fever, as you might imagine. But it's also the story of a 17-year-old Guatemalan boy who was admitted to the University Hospital in San Antonio with abdominal pain, fever, nausea, and vomiting. He had left Guatemala 5 weeks before and traveled by foot through Mexico, having drunk from ponds and streams all along the way. He stayed in southern Mexico for 2 weeks, then traveled by train, and you know how they travel by train, to San Antonio, where he was employed as a car painter. So obviously those streams and ponds had harbored the salmonella that caused his typhoid fever and pancreatitis. And the rest of it you're probably less interested in. But that is to key up our discussion today of borderland justice. And in that, we are led by the Borderland Justice Team. And so, Billie Lee, I wonder if you could introduce your team.
Our team is Jennifer Cullison, who we are about to lose. So you can't tell today, but we're all wearing black armbands. Although she is moving away from us to take a tenure track position with the University of California, she's not going so far that we can't find her. And in this modern day and age, we can always find out where you are. So we're not going to let go of her. Lois Bianchi. And among those of us who aren't here today is Jackie Reilly, who is suffering from COVID and not feeling up to being with us today, I'm sorry to say. And then Linda Doro is also on the team. And we are going to today ask you to think about how well we're doing in view of Kevin's remarks about the words of Leviticus, the words of George Washington, the words of John F. Kennedy, the aspirations of those fine resources. Just will at the end ask you, thumbs up or thumbs down, how are we doing in this country? And to get there, we're going to play a game called ICED. You may know about ICE. ICED is a video game that enables the players to live the day-to-day life of an immigrant youth living with the threat of being detained and deported. The game exposes our immigration laws that detain and deport people without due process and respect for human rights. These laws affect all immigrants, legal residents, those fleeing persecution, students, and undocumented people, no matter their circumstances. We should keep in mind what we all really know, and that is that unfair laws that deny due process and deport people without a hearing, that tie judges' hands and prevent them from considering the circumstances of each individual case, that expose extreme punishment for minor, really insignificant offenses, and based on that, hold immigrants in detention indefinitely, are a shame to this country and a threat to the freedoms of all of us. When we let the government deny due process and human rights for some people, after all, we put all of our freedoms at risk. So the rules of the game we're going to play today, we want to find out how much you know about immigration. You're going to be asked to answer in a group, a small group. You won't be on the spot by yourself. Myth or fact questions. Is this a myth? You'll be given a statement. Is it a myth or a fact? And then we'll talk about it a little. You'll be testing your character through moral decisions because, unlike in the real world we live in, any wrong decision, any wrong moral guess or misstep, no matter how well intentioned, can set an ICE officer on your trail. Good behavior can keep you in the system. Wrong answers to the myth-fact questions or wrong moral decisions increase your chances as a player of being hunted down, caught by ICE officers, and sent to level 2 detention, which we're going to learn more about too. Once in detention, you can be in jail for unknown amounts of time and sent to solitary confinement, which of course is called the hole for good reasons, and possibly deported back to a country that you may have come from as a child, but that you have never really known and have no memory of. The mission of ICED is to, well, the goal of ICED is to stay out of detention by making good decisions and doing positive things for your community. If you do these actions, you have the chance, theoretically at least, of becoming a citizen of the United States. You probably will get a grasp by the end of this exercise as to just how theoretical that is. Your mission is to locate all the quizzes and civic points indicated by icons. At these key locations, your character will be tested, which could earn or lose you points. If you lose too many points, ICE officers will catch you and send you to detention. If you're successful at answering the questions and avoiding the immigration officers, you have a chance to play a mini game to become a citizen. It's a game to us, but it's all too real to the people we're thinking about today. All right. Well, so how are you feeling about our country right now, folks, on this Memorial Day weekend? Yeah, it's a grim picture. So what I want to do now is just make some general comments, a few more educational points, and then I want to tell you about all the characters, their circumstances, and their outcomes. Anybody have any quick comments or observations they want to make at this point? Okay. Well, immigration laws in the U.S. are a nightmarish web. Even if you might be eligible for citizenship and you came in clean and you applied for citizenship, would anybody care to hazard a guess how long the average application process takes? You won't believe this.
Many years, I know.
20 years. 20 years. You might not even start. If you're my age, you might as well not. There are many, many, many little steps along the way. Each one can take a couple of years on up, and each one costs big bucks. So you enter the process and you get through and you go through all these little mazes, and you might make it through the stage and you might make it through that stage. And oh, your brother lost out on the third stage, but you make it through. And so now you've spent thousands of dollars, and then you can be thrown out of the system for some work anywhere along the way. So you're making it through and actually getting citizenship, even if you are eligible and could meet all the requirements, is really chancy at best. The other thing to talk about a little bit more is these the private detention centers. These folks are big business, and they exist, as big businesses do, for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to make money and to have a guaranteed source of income from the misery of people in detention, not criminals, but in detention pending their deportation hearing. And you've learned already that the deportation could come about because of some little glitch, some little flaw, some little thing done a long time ago and long since paid for. But you can spend any amount of time, unimaginable amounts of time in detention in these centers. So does it pay these centers to have decent food? Well, no, not so much. Does it pay them to have clean, decent quarters? Of course not. Of course, they're going to have every barrier up they can to somebody getting through successfully, because why? They want to stack the deck to always have seats, beds full. And they always want to have the guarantee of that income. And so they band together, they hire expensive lobbyists, and they have the ear of legislators who are always willing to believe the myths and to protect the interests of big business. So now, what about our participants? Let's talk about Aisha. Aisha has committed no crime, but Aisha came from India, is a legal permanent resident, green card holder, age 16, is a high school 10th grader, and wants to be a doctor. Aisha was detained by the FBI in New York City in the spring of 2005 and taken to an immigration detention center in Pennsylvania, hundreds of miles away from her family and friends. The FBI decided she was an imminent threat to security of the United States based on evidence that she was planning to be a suicide bomber. What was the evidence? She wrote an essay in school about freedom of speech and the Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
Javier was from Mexico, undocumented and in the country illegally, waiting for the DREAM Act to pass. Yeah, Dream On, right? He's 20, a food delivery boy who wants to be a teacher. Javier has lived in the United States since the age of 5, and his English is stronger than his Spanish. His parents came over with visitor visas to see relatives who lived in New York. In Mexico, they had no more family and had lost their family business because of NAFTA. So they decided to stay in the United States to work and make a life. They became undocumented, which is the proper term for illegal, when their visitor visas expired. But because there have been no options for immigrants to apply for legal residency since 1984, Javier remains undocumented. So that's his crime, undocumented, because the United States hasn't provided a way for him to apply. He was picked up when skating, and he was later deported. Mark's country of origin is Haiti. He's an asylum seeker because of the threat of violence and persecution in his country. He's 22. He was in the military and then unemployed. His family left Haiti when he was a boy to escape. Most of his family members had been killed by the United States-supported dictator. The family resettled in an impoverished area of New York, 5 of them, living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Eventually, they were granted asylum, and later Mark got a green card, but money was tight, and he saw the Army as a good path to be able to go to school.
I already heard that.
He didn't think joining would mean he would be sent off to the Iraqi war, and that he'd never be the same person again. But after fighting the war, he suffered PTSD and became severely depressed. Because the government didn't provide him with mental health support when he turned to alcohol and crime as an escape. He was deported for violating the conditions of his green card. Anna. I don't think we had Anna today because she was Jackie's, but her story was that she came from Poland. She thinks she's a citizen. She's 20, and she's an aspiring actress. She came to the United States at age 13. Both of her parents died later that year in a car accident, leaving her all alone. Then she was busted for smoking weed. She was charged and served her community service sentence and thought the past was behind her. However, at 16, on her way home from a school trip abroad, she was arrested. She spent 3 of her teenage years in a detention center waiting to hear whether or not she'd be deported to Poland because of a crime she'd already served time for. So not only did she serve her sentence, but then she had to spend 3 years in jail fighting her case. After $10,000 in legal expenses and support from her community, she was miraculously allowed to stay in the country. And then there's Suki from Japan, a visa holder, had an F1 student visa. He's 23, an aspiring computer scientist, came here on a student visa to attend Cornell University, but is now at risk of being deported because he didn't know that he needed to take a full course load as a condition of his student visa. For the first semester, he took only 9 hours of the 12, although he's taken the full 12 each of the 3 intervening semesters. But he unknowingly violated his visa payments requirements. And so because he didn't take enough credits his first semester at college, he was deported.
God.
Jeez.
So out of all of them, only Anna was able to stay.
And I think she's probably light-skinned woman.
Poland.
With financial support from friends.
Yeah.
An active Polish community.
Billie Lee, I have a question. What about, I mean, some of these individuals must have chronic health conditions, as well as there must be acute health crises that come up while they're in detention. Can you address that?
Well, in general, I can, because they are, at least as we have understood, there may be occasions when doctors are called in. There's no guarantee of that though. I mean, people don't even really know where they are. So they can be picked up and moved anytime by Homeland Security. So their family is unlikely to be able to know even where they are. If they're lucky and their family has the resources, their family may be able to get a doctor to them. But you can imagine the priority of getting medical care in to help someone when they're at the mercy of the profiteers who are trying to keep them down. Would anybody, Jennifer, would you like to add to that, or anybody like to make a comment?
Yeah, the detention centers usually have a clinic, and if you like look at their websites, they put pictures of their clinics, and they're like, you know, try to make it look like it's state of the art, and that the detainees, as they call them, are being treated well. But most of the reports that are, you know, having these stakeholders walk through and actually give them grades, that's consistently the problem. Those clinics, they'll send them back with ibuprofen when they really need like surgery, you know, or people will come in who need medications and they'll say, I need medications, and nobody will believe them until they're like diagnosed by somebody in this clinic, right? And then so people sometimes die because they are not like medically profiled quickly enough because profit.
I'm wondering particularly about individuals who might need a medication all the time, like individuals who are medicated for diabetes, high cholesterol, and those sorts of things, high blood pressure. Are they able to get medications?
In general, from what I've seen, is it will take a while before, if they didn't come with them, then it'll take a while, or they could be confiscated, right? It's just a very unpredictable and poor system when people come in with medical conditions. They get neglected. I mean, neglect is basically the operating term for medical needs, in particular psychological needs. Even though there's a detention office that is supposed to be monitoring how in immigrant detention, there's supposed to be greater numbers of services of this sort of thing compared to the Bureau of Prisons and criminal incarceration. But that doesn't mean that they really get served.
It looks to me as if our time is up today. What I'd like to do is now, I've lost my ability to see you guys. For some reason, I'm looking at a different screen now, but I can hear you fine. Jennifer, if you can see them, you can report about this. I want thumbs up if everybody thinks that what you've heard today is a worthy system for our country to be engaged in. Thumbs down if you think we could do a lot better.
Oh, yeah.
What do you say, that would be universal thumbs down.
Yeah. So the next step for us as UUers is to give some thought to what our role might be. And so perhaps at another time we can come back together and discuss that. In the meantime, if any of you would be interested in helping us think about this on a regular basis, you are more than welcome to join the Borderlands Justice Team. We would love to have you. Thank you so much for your caring and your attention today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautifully done, Billie Lee. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Very good. And let me just say that in 2 weeks, we will have Lonnie Feemster, former president of the Reno Sparks NAACP, speaking to us about race, another area in which our nation could use some improvement. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have